It is Thursday, September 10th, 2020, and this is your China Update. We have 4 pieces of information to cover today, including Kazakhstan plans to increase grain exports to China. Also, courtesy of the BBC, Xinjiang, U.S. to block key exports from Chinese region. Next, courtesy of Slate.com, how China's massive fishing fleet is transforming the world's oceans. We also have some new photos. Let's hop into it. And our first article is courtesy of New Europe. Kazakhstan plans to increase grain exports to China. The Ministry of Agriculture of Kazakhstan predicts to harvest 18 million tons of grain and export from this volume up to 8 million tons during the current marketing year, Agriculture Minister Saparkhan Omarov said at a briefing. We plan to increase the export of grain and flour to China. We are planning to harvest 18 million tons of grain this year, he said. The minister recalled that Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Iran will again become the main importing countries of Kazakh grain and flour. According to the ministry, in the 2020-2021 marketing year, Kazakhstan supplied 51,300 tons of wheat to China and 454,000 tons to Uzbekistan. In total, the Republic exported 648,800 tons of wheat. And this is courtesy of BBC.com. Xinjiang, U.S. to block key exports from Chinese region. The U.S. is to block key exports from China's Xinjiang region due to allegations that they are produced using forced labor. The proposed bans include cotton and tomato products, which are 2 of China's major commodity exports. The Trump administration has been ratcheting up pressure on China for its treatment of Xinjiang's Uyghur Muslims. In recent years, China has massively increased security in Xinjiang, citing a threat of separatism and terrorism. By some estimates, up to 1 million people have been detained without trial for minor infractions in what China says are re-education camps. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection is currently preparing withhold release orders, which allows it to detain shipments based on suspicions of forced labor involvement. The law is aimed at combating human trafficking, child labor, and other human rights abuses. Earlier this year, U.S. lawmakers proposed legislation that would assume that all goods produced in Xinjiang were made with forced labor and would require certification if they are not. Washington and Beijing have repeatedly clashed over the high-security detention camps, which China says are necessary to improve security. We have reasonable but not conclusive evidence that there is a risk of forced labor in supply chains related to cotton textiles and tomatoes coming out of Xinjiang, CBP Executive Assistant Commissioner Brenda Smith told Reuters in an interview. We will continue to work our investigations to fill in those gaps, she added. The proposed bans could have a far-reaching impact for U.S. retailers, clothes makers, and food producers. China produces about 20% of the world's cotton, with most of it coming from Xinjiang. The region is also a major source of petrochemicals and other goods that feed into Chinese factories. This week, U.S. entertainment giant Disney came under fire for shooting its new film Mulan in the Xinjiang province. The film was already the target of a boycott after its lead actress backed a crackdown on Hong Kong protests. Thank you for watching this video. If you're finding it informative, please consider giving the channel a subscribe. And our last article is courtesy of Slate.com, how China's massive fishing fleet is transforming the world's oceans. More than 100 miles from shore, near the coast of West Africa, I accompanied Marine police officers from Gambia as they arrested 15 foreign ships on charges of labor violations and illegal fishing over the course of a week in 2019. All but one of the vessels arrested were from China. At the beginning of that same year, during a month-long voyage on a toothfish longliner headed into Antarctic waters from Punta, Chile, the only other ships we passed were a dozen rusty Chinese fishing vessels that looked barely seaworthy. Aboard a South Korean squid boat in May of 2019, I watched nearly 24 ships flying Chinese flags make their way single file into North Korean waters in flagrant violation of United Nations sanctions. They were part of the world's largest fleet of illegal ships, 800 Chinese trawlers fishing in the Sea of Japan as of 2019, revealed in a recent investigation by NBC. And this month, more than 340 Chinese fishing vessels appeared just outside the biodiverse and ecologically sensitive Galapagos Marine Reserve. Many of the ships were tied to companies associated with illegal fishing, according to C4ADS, a conflict research firm. With anywhere from 200,000 to 800,000 boats, some as far afield as Argentina, China is unmatched in the size and reach of its fishing armada. Fueled primarily by government subsidies, its growth and activities have largely gone unchecked, in part because China itself has historically had few rules governing fishing operations. The scale and aggressiveness of its fleet puts China in control, says Greg Poling, director of the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Not that the fishing itself is unimportant. The fleet is also a way to obtain food security for China's 1.4 billion people. Many of the marine stocks closest to China's shores have dwindled from overfishing and industrialization, so ships are forced to venture further to fill their nets. The Chinese government says it has roughly 2,600 distant water fishing vessels, which makes it 3 times larger than the fleets of the next top 4 countries, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and Spain combined. In 2018, total global fishery subsidies were estimated to be $35.4 billion, with China accounting for $7.2 billion of it. And our last piece of information is a series of photos of Chongqing allegedly taken on September 6th. And I think that's a good place to wrap up today's video. I hope that you found it informative, and check back soon for more content.